Okay, and we are live. Hopefully, y'all can hear me okay. Hopefully, the audio is good, no issues. Welcome back, everybody. I want to give a quick shout out to Slowboy Whiteboard in the chat with the congrats on 100 subs. I just saw that. So, thank you to everybody for subscribing. Really appreciate everybody, the support. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate the congratulations there. Shout out to Slowboy Whiteboard. Shout out to Ellie. Shout out to Day Jire and Jethro, always sharing the streams, much appreciated. And to all the subscribers, yeah, we I never thought I'd get 100 subscribers, so I never really had any kind of goals or anything, but it's cool to get there, and we're gonna keep going. So anyway, this stream I had an idea. I've been wanting to do a stream on this for a while, and I'll probably do some more in the future, but when you do streams with your friends, you kind of get ideas, and then they'll say something. You're like, oh, that ties in with it. It just kind of builds, and so that's one of the reasons I really like having people on. And so one of those, then the last stream we did with Mikhail from Technoir Graphics, Baselit Analyzer, and Jerry from Exposing Powerful Lies. This topic kind of came up, which related to a stream I'd done on Jerry's channel. So it just kind of it builds, and that's one of the things that keeps this fun, and it's kind of reinvigorating for me and motivation to keep doing this. So anyway, all that being said, we are going to bring back our returning guest. I think this is his third appearance on the show. So he now will hold the record, actually, for the most appearances on the show. We've done a bunch of streams together. It's always fun. Welcome, Jerry from Exposing Powerful Lies, back to the show.
What's up? Yo, what's up? Thank you so much for having me. Again, we back again. That's right, everybody. You got to look at my face some more. I'm here. What's up?
Man, yes, thank you. Thank you so much for coming back. These are always a good time. And so I know everybody in the chat, I know who I can see, they know who you are. And I think actually a lot of people who have come over here have come over from your channel, from the support. And so, but for people who may see this later, or people watching who may not be in the chat or whatever, tell the people whatever you think they should know about you.
Yeah, so I'm Jerry, just an Orthodox Christian. Channels Exposing Powerful Lies. We do all sorts of different stuff. We like to do like movie, breakdowns and TV show breakdowns. Really, the channel is just about me. It's just sort of like my blog, and so all the things that I'm interested in, all of my experiences, I share on there. I do, I've had a very colorful history as far as I spent a lot of years traveling and train hopping and hoboing and doing the street kid thing. And then also right out of high school, I actually got involved. I was a really hardcore, like, militant anarchist, and I was very involved in the local anarchist circles in my hometown. And that's how I got into eco-activism, which it's funny because like every time you bring up a story, I'm like, oh, I got experience in that. I'm like, dude, how many lives have I lived already? So when you brought up the eco-activism thing, I'm like, no, that's I was really excited to talk about that because I actually have quite a story to tell with that, and a little bit of experience there. And so, with my channel, like I share my experiences, my stories. I always say I'm a storyteller at heart. I love to hear people's stories, meet people, learn their stories, and share my own. And so with my channel, I hope to basically just encourage folks by sharing my opinion and my experiences and what I've learned throughout my life. I hope to encourage folks to, seek the truth and go to the church and find Christ the way I did. And so that's basically what I hope to do. So yeah, if anybody wants to subscribe, you can find me over at Exposing Powerful Lies, and that's it.
Yeah, and we were just talking before we started. You've been on a tear with the streams this week. Do you want to maybe kind of touch on just real quick, touch on the last few streams you've done and talk about, what you were getting into with that?
Sure, yeah. So the last one we did last night was a sponsored stream. If anybody wants to sponsor a stream, that's like the biggest way you can help out the channel. I always say, about $100 donation through any of my links, and I will spend 10 hours, which basically amounts to 1 week, where I spend like 2 hours every day looking into whatever the topic is, whether it's a film, movie, book, social issue, religious, anything really. Think outside the box, anything you want to see me cover, maybe a YouTuber that's, a little crazy or whatever. And I will spend 2 hours a day for about a week, sometimes more, looking into whatever the topic is, writing notes, collecting my thoughts on it, and then I basically will restructure and edit my notes into a show, and then I'll present anywhere from an hour to 3 hours plus stream on the subject. And so the last one we did was a birth control stream, all about the lies of birth control, and some horrible stuff there. That was a really dark show. I don't even want to get into it. The summary of that is drugs are bad. Don't take birth control. Women shouldn't take it. It causes abortions a bunch of times. It also changes who women are attracted to because of the hormonal changes in their brain. Makes them attracted to less testosterone men. And basically, it was created by Margaret Sanger, who also helped found Planned Parenthood. So all sorts of bad ties there. And then before that show, we did a cringe stream, which we like to do, covering these like silly new agers. And the one we did last time was on this Guru Jagged. Her name was Guru Jagged. And she was like this white suburban chick that just decided to be a guru, and like it was just nuts. And then before that, we had Father Lynch, Father Zachariah Lynch from Patristic Faith and English Pen Blog on. And we just talked about Russia, Ukraine, the schismatic Ukrainian church, and Orthodox Christianity as a whole. So that was really such a great honor and one of my favorite shows I've done. That was really fun. But yeah, so we've been on a tear. I'm so sick of seeing my face on the screen. So probably take a little break after that. But like I said before, like the last two shows we did, we made absolutely nothing, and that's fine. But I do want to shill really hard for my channel and say, please sponsor shows. And if you do like the show, please support it, because gotta keep me alive, guys. I will starve to death if you don't share the streams. If you don't support the streams, I will starve to death, and it'll be all your fault. So I don't think I could gaslight or guilt trip any harder than I already am. So please allow me to guilt trip and gaslight you into supporting my show. And that's all.
Yes, absolutely. I second that. I may or may not join in on the gaslighting and guilt tripping, but hey, depends on how I'm feeling that day.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll and because I kind of touched on this in the intro, but when we did our stream, on the train hopping and hobo life and street kids and all that, and we talked about, kind of touched on how a lot of people involved in anarchism and various radical. And when I say radical, that's a term that gets misconstrued a lot. Radical just means it's like a radical is just someone who wants to upend one system and replace it with a different one. So that kind of gets conflated with the term extremist or like whatever. But that's all it means. And, radical, good or bad, whatever. I'm not here to debate that. I'm just saying that's how I use the term in its in original sense. And so that came up. And then when we did the last stream with BLA and Mikhail, we talked about because there have been instances of anarchists being involved in train derailments, and I'm not saying that what's happened in South Carolina or Ohio, or was it Nebraska, or any of these, I think it was one in Texas. I'm not saying that they did that, but I had asked, because Jerry had mentioned kind of interacting with those people, and I'd asked him about in his experience, would he put it past people like that to derail trains and whatnot. And so we kind of got into that a little bit, and so then it's like he said, he hit me with that he had a history with eco-activism. And so anyway, do you want to
one comment before you go on? Where you talked about the anarchists and the train derailment, that I just thought of. Not only would I not put it past them, but in history, the government has used anarchist groups before to do things, and not just ours, but like all throughout history, anarchist underground collectives and stuff were often utilized to pull off certain events and certain attacks and stuff. And even if they weren't fully in the know, they were exploited and sort of helped guided along by certain powers and moneyed interests and stuff to do certain things that were beneficial to the ruling class. Anarchists were often used as like the sort of destroyers or the demolition squad, go in and rile up the mob and they can tear it down. And then out of the chaos, they will bring order, and out of the sort of destruction. So, groups, Emma Goldman and these Peter Kropotkin, these sort of philosophical anarchists, or as I used to call them, library anarchists, sit there and philosophize about how their utopia would be so great if everybody could do whatever they wanted and there was no oppressive state to control them. And that basically gets the crowd all riled up, and yeah, let's tear this stuff down. But then once they tear it down, whoever's got the guns and whoever's got the biggest army of thugs can just come in afterwards and rebuild it however they want it. And so we've seen that happen a lot. And so not only would I not put it past an anarchist group to be responsible, even though we could never say for sure whether or not in those cases specifically they were, not only would they, but they have in the past been utilized as really what's the useful idiots, if you will.
No, that's a really good point. And yeah, I think that I've read some excerpts from like Kropotkin, and I think he was not royalty, but I think he was some kind of noble or something, if I remember correctly. And yeah, that's something you see a lot, is moneyed or powerful people kind of espousing these certain philosophies, but it's like, oh, this is something for the workers. And I will say, if you look at some of the tenets of like anarchism, is that it's one of those things. It can sound nice on paper. It's like, oh, everybody's equal, we all just get along, and workers own everything. And it's like, yeah, that sounds nice, but it just doesn't work. And this is a great comment right here. Everyone is an anarchist until post-anarchy sets in. Social structures will eventually prevail no matter what, given enough time. And so, yeah, having a totally, egalitarian kind of society, it doesn't work. And you're right, yeah. And so people who, they can easily get steamrolled by someone who doesn't adhere to that. So yeah, if somebody stronger comes along, then it's like, okay, your ideals kind of go out the window. But no, yeah, that's an excellent point. And if you want to delve into more of that, please do, for sure. But since you mentioned having, experiences with eco-activism, if you want to dive into that, take it wherever you want, and share as much as you feel comfortable sharing. And I think well, yeah, I don't want to. I'll let you go wherever you want to go with that.
Let me incriminate myself. No, I'm just joking. And this was actually the very first topic I ever covered in the orthosphere, as it's sometimes called. For anybody who hasn't been following my channel since the very beginning, which is probably only one of y'all, Jethro and Henley and Mixkey and a few of the OG Tristans, Maddie. I know you've been in Tristan's sphere for a long time. Basically, I got my start. I was in a really dark place in my life, still with my ex, the vegan, and which is still a great band name. And I was going through some tough stuff, and I called into Tristan's show, and that was one of the first topics that me and him spoke on, because he was covering eco activists, and I was like, yeah, I actually had some experience in those circles. And so I have covered it before, and so I'm not worried about necessarily incriminating myself. I won't say where I was, what specifically, the year and stuff like that. But when I was a youngin, I was involved, like I said, very actively with the anarchist circles in my hometown. I was philosophically very much an anarchist or an anarcho-communist, and I really believed it. And so I practiced what I preached. I wasn't one of these gays or whatever that they love to talk it, but and then it's go home to their rich parents or whatever and eat their baguettes and wear their berets and sip tea and talk about Emma Goldman or whatever. I was very much, I believed it, and I was like, no, we got to do this, right? And so I got involved with Food Not Bombs, which is an anarchist collective of, basically, it's like a vegan anarchist collective, and they're in most major cities, and they operate by either dumpster diving a bunch of fruits and vegetables from Aldi's and grocery stores or whatever, or they'll get donations from certain groups, and They will come together once, twice, sometimes more a week, and they'll cook vegan food, and then they'll go downtown or to wherever a public park is, and they'll start handing out free vegan food to everybody. And the big thing is, it's like it's not for homeless; it's for everybody. Anybody who wants some dank vegan food, come on down, you know. And then oftentimes they'll have anarchist literature there, and you know, so it's an anti-war movement. It's also a vegan movement. It's also an anarchist movement. Food Not Bombs. It started in the 70s. It's a global institution now, and it is an anarchist collective, which means there is no real structure of it. You know what I mean? It's like it's sort of, you know, I could go downtown right now and, you know, print out some Food Not Bombs banners and start my own chapter if I wanted to, and you could be as connected to the central structure of it, you know, quote unquote, as you want or not. So it's an autonomous organization. So in that way, I started to get tapped in with all of the anarchists in my hometown. You know, that's where I sort of started to come across them. Also, there's a bookstore in my town, which I won't name, which is an anarchist bookstore, which also served as a meeting point, central HQ, if you will, of the subversive circles in our town, whether they were protesters, activists, library anarchists, all of it. And so everybody in that town that were active anarchists would meet up in these two places. And so I would go down there for poetry readings and all this sort of, you know, lame stuff. And I made some really good friends, you know, at the time anyways, through those circles. And I started hearing all about, you know, eco-activist groups, Earth First specifically, and all of that stuff. And then there was a documentary that was published, like a 5-pack DVD collection of whatchamacallit, of anarchist documentaries published by Crime Think, which is an anarchist publishing company, publishes a bunch of books, including the one book that actually inspired me to start hopping trains and stuff, in Evasion. Well, they published this collective, basically this collective DVD, and one of the documentaries is called Pickaxe, and it was all about this group Earth First and their monkey wrenching project against this logging facility up in the Appalachian Mountains, I believe, and all about how they won. You know, they went up there and they locked themselves onto trees and they, you know, cemented their arms into grounds in front of trucks and, you know, locked down this logging facility and ended up winning the court case and ended up saving the forest, right? That's how the documentary puts it. They saved the woods, they saved the old growth forest, which again, and I'm not going to sit here and debate whether or not, you know, certain of these issues are correct because, you know, I don't agree with necessarily just like going through and raping the woods and like, you know, totally just destroying nature in the you know, in the guise of progress and industrialization. You know, that's the thing with a lot of these evils in the world is that they'll take a truth and then they'll just package it with all this other nonsense. And that little bit of truth is how they get people like me at the time involved. The useful idiots, you know. You think you're doing something good, and so you put your energy and you put your life on the line to try to fight this fight, and you don't even realize who you're fighting on behalf of, what the ultimate goal is at the end, et cetera, et cetera. And so through this documentary, through these friends, through this sort of collective understanding of, you know, we got to do something, man. We got to fight the revolution. We all sort of, me and my friends decided that we were going to get involved with Earth First, and they have multiple rendezvous every year. They have winter rondies, they call them, summer rondies, nationals, locals, and basically it's a terrorist training camp is what it is. It's you go, you know, they find a land. Usually they find like communes, which I was surprised at the time to learn that there are communes still in America, you know, that have been since the 70s. You know, some rich hippies get together and they buy a plot of land and they build a bunch of houses on it and they make a compound. And then it's basically like a co-op, like it's collectively owned and they all work the land and whatever. Somehow they get the funding for it. And then a bunch of old hippies are still living there. And the one I went to, basically they found one of these old communes and there was nobody under like 40 living there. Like most of them were like 60 years old, 70 years old, like these old hippies. And they had this big plot of land with all these different houses on them. And they said, hey, can we use your land to host this 2-week event, this rendezvous? And they said, sure. And so 2, 3, 400 activists will then descend on this land up in the mountains, And in all of these different houses, they have multiple classes going on, and then they have these chalkboards all throughout the property telling you 10 a.m. Monkey wrenching class, 11 a.m. In house B, we're going to teach you how to monkey wrench a bulldozer, how to pour salt or sand into the gasoline tanks of logging vehicles, and all these. It's basically a training camp for terrorism. It was like, how do you do this? And it was really well organized, surprisingly enough, for anarchists. All sorts of different classes on all sorts of different techniques, times where we would sit and watch you know Hollywood produce, production level quality videos on how to do activism and how to best avoid getting arrested, how to best, most effectively do certain things. And they had it broken down into three camps: a camp, or a green camp, red camp, and yellow camp, just like a stoplight. Green camp was, you've got a warrant, or you're an illegal immigrant, or for whatever reason you cannot get arrested, right? And so you stay with green camp, and those are the guys who will stand on the other side of the whatever the direct action is, with the signs, earth first, save the forest, blah 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 blah. You're not going to get arrested. You have a very low chance of ever getting arrested if you're just standing there as a public person, expressing yourself and expressing support for the terrorist action that's going on. Then you've got orange camp or yellow camp or whatever, where you might get arrested. Okay. Maybe you're on the other side of the street, closer to them. Maybe you're doing little things here or there that, it's illegal, but you can still evade if you're smart and careful. And then you've got red camp, which are the guys who chain themselves to trucks and, cement their arms into grounds and do things where it's like, you will be there holding it up until the cops drag you away and throw you in jail. And those are the guys who get all the salutes from all the hippies and the that guy's a badass, man. He just got arrested for this.
So not
Um,
to interrupt, I just have a quick question,
yeah.
because I think this is one of the tactics. I got really into, because I remember the 1999 WTO protests in Seattle. The battle in Seattle is known to be called. I vaguely remember that when it was happening, but then I kind of I've delved into it again, kind of studying the history of it more recently. And I think they use that same tactic with the cement. So my question is, do you know, how do you get your arms out of that? Because that seems like you're going to run into some serious problems trying to get it. Like, do you know how do you escape from that?
I think it's horrifying. Did you see that in the pickaxe documentary where they were cementing their arms into the ground?
No,
You
I've only seen a couple clips from that. I haven't
Yeah,
watched the
so
full thing. I
so
will
you're
watch it, but I
literally
haven't seen that yet.
you're on your side and your arms cemented into the ground. They pour cement around your arm basically, and then you are completely dependent on your activist friends to come scoop the poop out of the bowl and bring you food and water and all. And it's dangerous, man. I mean, like, if the cops want to come in and block access to you and arrest all your buddies and you're stuck there, maybe it takes them a week to get you out. You know what I mean? And I'm sure the cops aren't really going to be too concerned about coming to clean up your waste and bring you food and water. And so, but they do that on purpose, and they do that to make it so that they might die, and then the cops are worried that they might die because that will look very good for the movement and for the action. And so that's the thing. And this is a common thread with this stuff, that's what I started to realize, is we're cannon fodder. We are literally here to get arrested, to get 10 years in jail, to get 20 years in jail, to get federal crimes slapped on us, to even perhaps die. And that will help the movement. And that was considered a sacrifice that we need to make. And, as a white cisgendered male, we have privilege to get arrested. Those illegal immigrants, they don't have a voice. They're voiceless. They can't speak, because if they speak, if they protest, they're going to get thrown and deported. And so, as a white male, you have to use your privilege to fight for the revolution. And, if that means dying, if that means going to jail for the rest of your life, like, you'll be our hero. And so, yeah, I have no idea how they get their arms out. I'm sure it's got something to do with a jackhammer and hours and hours of oil and who knows what, man. But it's horrifying. And about the whole possibly dying, the one where that's really brought into play is when we're talking about monopods or tree stands. And that's like in the Pickaxe documentary, the guys who go up and chain themselves at the top of these old growth trees, which are hundreds of feet tall or whatever. They basically chain themselves, lock themselves down where it's very difficult to get them out. And they do it on specific trees that were going to get cut. That way, if they cut the tree, they will kill the person, and so they're unable to do it until they get the person off. They can hold the facilities up for weeks, and that every day that one of these facilities is not operational, they're losing millions of dollars. And so that's why that's the whole goal, is to lose them enough money to where they will give up the project, or at least at the very least, you cost them millions of dollars and F the logging company, And so the whole point of that is to use your death as collateral for the goal. And a monopod is a tree stand where there is no tree. And so what happened, and we actually built one of those when we were doing the action that we did, was that we all ran in, 100 of us, carrying different sections of this steel girder thing. And we ran in and we set up this pole. We connected it all together. We all collectively pushed it up so that it's basically like a metal pole. And then you go and you chain it. You chain it to a truck, chain it to a fence, chain it to wherever you don't want the things to move. And then somebody climbs up to the top of it. And there's like a big PVC pipe type thing that they stick their arm into. And then there's a giant, one of those thick chain link chains, and then they chain their arm to it, and then they wrap it around their hands, and then they get like these big padlocks, and they padlock it, and then put the tube over it. So now you're there, and it's going to take them forever to get you out, and you're at the top of this pole. And if they try to open that fence, or if they try to move that truck, or if they try to move any of this stuff, that's going to come tumbling down, and you're going to die. And so that's red team, and that's the people who it's like you're going to jail, but you're also doing the real hard work, And so you asked me about the story. So yeah, so we go down to this camp, me and my buddies. We all decided, oh, they're doing the rendezvous, we got to go down there. And we spent 2 weeks at this commune where we studied at all these classes. And the way that these are organized is basically they're just seminars. That's all this is. It's just a seminar. You're just going to learn about eco-activism. It's an activist training camp, right? We're not doing anything illegal. We're just talking and using our First Amendment, and we're just teaching you some stuff, Not that you'll ever need to use it, but everybody who's there who is an actual activist, who actually is in the know, knows that there is going to be a direct action at the end of this, and that you're actually being trained for a specific event. Nobody ever says anything about it. And if you do say anything about it, they're going to consider you an informant and they're going to kick you out. But basically, you got 2 weeks, you sit there, you're camping in tents. There's wood burning stoves everywhere. There's collective food, like meals 3 times a day. They had a group called Seeds of Peace, which were basically like a mobile food not bombs, where they had a school bus that they converted into a mobile kitchen, and they would actually drive to protests, and they would serve food for thousands of people. That's their kitchen was set up to serve thousands of people. So that way, when there's protests going on, they can keep it going indefinitely, because they know once the food runs out, the protesters got to go home. So that's why Seeds of Peace and groups like that will get together, and they'll go and they'll feed the protesters to keep it going. And then a question comes, well, where do they get the funding for this? Where is the money coming from? These are, what are these, just random poor barefoot hippies that have, millions of dollars to spend on hosting these 2-week seminars? Where do the wood burning stoves come from? Where do the tents come from? Where does the food come from? That's one thing I wish I could go back and take a peek and actually get to follow the money trail and see exactly where it comes from, because I guarantee it would be very interesting what you find. There's so much to go into, and I'm sorry I'm all over the place, but there's so many aspects to that I want to touch on. But just to follow the specific story of myself, we get down there, we spend the time. My buddy, who was sort of my connection into all this, told me, just so you know, we're going to do something at the end of this, and but don't say anything. And the way that they structure any sort of anarchist activist group, whether you're an Animal Liberation Front, right, the vegan activists, or Earth Liberation Front, the eco activists, or any of these things,
and there's a lot of crossover between which we'll get into that a little bit later. But the ELF and the ALF are tied in very close together.
Yes. Yeah, all these groups are the same kinds of people are engaged in them and involved in them, and they utilize the same organizational structure, the same autonomous, decentralized organization, basically, to do them. And they all utilize what's called an affinity group. And an affinity group means that you are a small group of people, because there's hundreds of people at this camp, right? And you don't know any of them. You get the 4 or 5 people that you do know, and you form an affinity group with them. And so that's the group that you talk to. Those are the trusted members. You don't share any information with anybody else there. You're all there to learn, but you don't actually give away any incriminating information or any knowledge of what you plan to do to anybody, not even the organizers, about it, other than your affinity group. And this is the way that this is what they called security culture. That's, I believe, again, forgive me, this was over 10 years ago, but I believe they called it security culture. And this was a way, this was one of the classes that they actually gave us, was always assume that there's a federal agent next to you. Basically, always assume in any of these camps, any of these, training seminars, there's going to be at least one FBI agent. There's going to be at least one informant. And so we need to practice security culture and never say anything to anybody you don't know and don't trust, with your life, basically. And so, I mean, the whole thing was paranoid as hell. And I'm sure they're not wrong, but like, even once it got to the point where we were going to the action, they had it split up in multiple fragmented, like they didn't just give you the address for the place we were going. They gave you an address to A point, and then you met up at A point, and then they gave you the address to B point, and then at B point you got to C point, and then C point you got to D point, and then D point you finally get to the location. So literally, like, they told us, they go, just assume when we get there, there's going to be a million cops there already, because there's probably an informant in our group. You know what I mean? Just assume it. We get there and there wasn't. So we were all very surprised about that. But anyways, so yeah, I go to this camp. I spend 2 weeks there. And funny enough, I actually met one of the guys who lived at the commune, one of these old hippies, and befriended him. And me and my close buddy, who was in my affinity group, made good friends with this guy. He was a really sweet guy, just a nice old hippie guy that, unfortunately was an anarchist, but old man, basically, and just trying to live his life in the woods. And so while everybody else was sleeping in tents, we were sleeping in his house, and no electricity, everything, wood burning and stuff. And he had a massive grand piano, and he had built his house all around this massive grand piano, and big floor to ceiling windows looking out over, hundreds of acres of maple trees. And at night, when the sun would set, he'd play Chopin on the piano. And that was the first time I ever heard Chopin. And just candlelight, he'd be playing the nocturnes. And I mean, it was it was awesome, man. It was so cool. Took us out into the maple grove and showed us the sugar shack and how he made maple syrup. And so I was having a really good time there. And at the time, obviously, I was super into the activism. So I was learning a lot of that too. So at the end, we go from 400 people and okay, it's over. Everybody have a good night, go drive safe or whatever. And then we're all just sitting around campfires waiting for everybody to leave. And you start to see the people funnel out who weren't in the know. Everybody's getting in their cars, driving away. And then the night sets and you look around and it's like, oh, there's 250 of us left. Okay, let's go. And then we had a big, massive meeting where we all stood in a circle. And then there were 3 or 4 organizers who were like the head of it all, basically, which is so funny because it's like, oh, anarchists, but there's like 3 or 4 like main organizers that put this together and that are the boss, basically. But we don't call them the boss, but they know what's up, and they're the ones that'll give you the directions to the site, and they're the ones that planned all this, and they're of course the ones who cash the paychecks from whatever shadowy organization it is that are putting this together, and they're the ones that, yeah.
And not to interrupt, but I just wanted to make a point, and I don't have direct experience with like eco-activism organizing, but something that a lot of people, I know this, and I'm sure people maybe watching this know, but there's a misconception when people talk about like anarchists or radical Marxists or whatever, and they're like, oh, these people are they're just stupid, they're crazy, whatever. And like, yeah, a lot of them are dumb, and a lot of them are crazy. But naive. What people, naive as well. But what people don't realize, And you could see, you know, there were some clips with this. You could see like during the, you know, 2020, you know, what was going on in all the cities then. And then if you see people who are involved in organizing, you know, who have an online presence, is the thing that people don't realize is that maybe people, you know, a lot of people that don't seem to realize is that organizers tend to be very smart. They are very focused. They are very dialed in. Like these are not, and you know, their ideas may be kind of crazy, but like that's who I think it's important. I'm not saying you focus on it, but like just people in general. Like if you're interested in this kind of stuff, want to study this more, it's important to look at the organizers because they're smart. They know what to look for. They know what kind of people to target in what way. They know how to make things happen. Like these are very smart, competent, charismatic, well-spoken people. I just wanted to throw that out in there.
Yeah, they're psychopaths, man. They're literally like sociopaths. They use people, you know, and they're predators, you know. They're predators for useful idiots, whether they're rich kids who, you know, get so radicalized by these sort of documentaries that groups like Crime Think puts out, or they're poor people like me that also get radicalized by these documentaries and by, you know, books and public media and Rage Against the Machine and blah 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 blah. And they use you, and they find the ones that are the idealists. They find the ones that are willing to sacrifice themselves. You know, when you're 18 years old, the idea of going to federal prison for 25 years for a to save mommy Earth, that sounds real great. That sounds like I'm going to be a hero. And literally, that's what these people do. They throw themselves into the meat grinder, and it's only afterwards that when they have 25 years in federal prison to sit around and think about it, do they start to realize, like, who was I fighting for? You know, like at the end of the day, like even if we succeeded, okay, one logging site got shut down, one fracking site got shut down. There's still 1,000 more, and none of this is going to stop. What did I actually do? You know, oh, well, that one politician that was in Congress, you know, he cited this protest as a reason why we needed to pass this liberal law or whatever that requires big corporations to pay X amount of money to the government to frack now. Okay. Was that 25 years worth it? You know, and why did we do this? And for what purpose? And who got paid for it? And who benefited from this? Or was I just a pawn, you know? And I know it sounds like like crazy talk to say 25 years of federal prison. I literally met people there that just got out of jail for 30 years for doing these things. This one girl, she was like considered like a hero there, like always had a circle of people around her, this one old lady. And it was like, dude, she just got out of jail for 30 years. She burned down a logging facility. Like she literally like was charged with like arson, you know, like for burning down this logging facility, cost them, you know, tens of millions of dollars. And she would sit around the campfire and tell stories about when the cops were hunting for her. You know, she had this one story where she's like, yeah, the cops were hunting for us, my affinity group, they all got away, but I was left behind, and I'm in the desert, and they were combing the desert with flashlights looking for me. And she goes, I had nowhere to go, so I just huddled into a ball onto the desert floor, and I just said, I'm a bush, I'm a bush, I'm a bush, I'm a bush. And they walked right past me, and they they thought I was a bush, and everyone was like, whoa, dude, that's so cool. She morphed herself into a bush. And then she told about how she eventually she got out, she went home, she was in her apartment, and then she realized, like, I got to go back to work. And they knew who she was. They, I guess they found her ID, or somehow they were able to identify her. And so she just went to work, and they arrested her at work. She went to jail for like 30 years. And again, in a lot of these classes, they were telling you, they were literally indoctrinating you, telling you going to jail is your privilege. This is, you know, look, you know, if you don't want it, that's fine. You could join Green Camp, but like, you know, the real ones go to Right Camp. You know, the real ones go to jail. And of course, you have the group think, and everybody will pat you on your back, and all of that. But so she ascended all the way up to bush status. Yes, star seeds ascend. And I saw somebody said, "Did you guys sing this Kumbaya together too?" Yeah, literally, there were big bonfires at the end of the night, and they're massive bonfires. At one point, they did a naked pyramid. All these people just stripped off their clothes and did a human pyramid naked, and like this weird pagan style stuff, you know, like really weird stuff.
And the thing is that, and this is another point with the, and again, you know, I don't have an insider perspective, it's an outsider perspective, but it seems pretty obvious that that is yet another example of the organizers knowing how to tailor the sort of social bonding methods to the people who are there, because they know what kind of people, and they know, you know, it's not going to be homogenous. It's not like everybody's going to be exactly the same, but they know that, oh, we're going to have this, you know, bonfire. We're going to have these every night. Everybody's going to hang out. We're going to do this kind of activity. Like these people understand the, and you know, psychology, whatever. That's I have my own thoughts on that whole thing as a field, but if just to use that term, like they understand the basic psychology of people and how to bring people kind of under the same, kind of in the same ideology. And I know I kind of lost my train of thought there, but I think you know what I'm getting at with that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. They know exactly how to organize these things to have group bonding rituals and, you know, the social sort of programming aspect to it where, you know, they create an environment. It's all curated it's a manipulation, you know, and it's what most predators do. You know, outcome manipulation, they tell you exactly what you need to hear to get the sort of reaction that they want out of you, you know. So you have a lot of that for sure. So funny enough, at this camp is where I met and interacted with the very first trans person I ever met. It was some dude in a dress and earrings and stuff, and all high on amphetamines and God knows what else. And what else? Also, when I was there, I met a anarchist propagandist who is one of the most famous anarchist propagandists of our day. This guy Frank Lopez, who, you know, I'm kind of doxing now, I guess, but like he came out publicly in the beginning as Frank Lopez and made all sorts of documentaries and stuff, and then slowly started to decide he was going to be anonymous. And then he came out as the Stimulator. If anybody has ever been in any anarchist circles, you guys would probably know this name very well. The Stimulator. He does riot porn news reporting. Basically, he's an anarchist news show. He does I forget what's the company that he created. It's like submedia.tv. He did all these basically just riot reporting where he would show today in anarchy in Spain there was a clash with police and protesters in, you know, Barcelona, and then over in France in Paris the radical feminist burned down an abortion clinic, or, you know, burned down a church and blah 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 blah. And then over in America we had a protest against the WTO in Seattle and blah, 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 blah. And I met this guy and was talking to him, and that's how I discovered his work. And then I realized I had been following him already for like a year on his YouTube or whatever. And so we talked a lot about it. And what do you know? This guy's like some rich, you know, baguette eating, beret eating, you know, wearing, you know, lame-o. And I was really shocked. He gave a whole presentation. One of the classes was him sharing one of his documentaries about a Texas town that was right by a Valero plant, and the, you know, cancer rates were super high, you know, in like a 15-mile radius around this camp and or around this plant. And what do you know? But it's all a bunch of illegal immigrants that live there, and that's where they funnel them in so that all the poor minorities get sick and all the white people can, you know, make money off of, you know, just propaganda stuff. Which again, there's probably some truth to a lot of these problems that they bring up, but then, you know, the solution is always, you know, radical anarchism and liberal ideology and stuff. But point
And
is,
that's something,
yeah,
not to keep interrupting, but this is just, I made a note about this earlier when you were talking about food, not bombs. And, you know, I certainly want you to finish where you're going with this, but I just wanted to, could you, it seems like a lot of people, there's this kind of idealism of you know, like wanting to do good in the world. And, you know, I'm not a vegan, I don't support veganism, but, you know, with food not bombs kind of having this you know, this mission of like, well, let's go out and feed people, and, you know, we're not going to discriminate or anything like that. It's like whoever wants or needs food, like, you know, you can get it. And you know, people trying to raise awareness about legitimate concerns. Like you said, there's probably some truth to some of those things, and you know, there's tons of examples of that where people you know, in lower socioeconomic classes, like they tend to, they'll go put some kind of like toxic factory. Or you look at Appalachia, right? All these people, the coal companies will blow the tops off the mountains and let all the slurry run down into these people's backyards, into their
Yep.
ponds, into their drinking water. And like, what are they going to do about it? These coal companies have probably dozens, if not hundreds, of lawyers on staff, and it's never going to go anywhere. And
And when
so,
they do that, it kills the entire mountain, and then they spray
yeah,
it with this like green like spray to make it look good, but it's like a dead
right.
mountain. Yeah, that was one of the classes they gave us too. Was all about mountain cap removal, and yeah.
Which is a horrible practice, in my opinion. And so I was wondering, what do you think of that? Of people who want to do good in the world, who see these problems, who see legitimate problems, correctly diagnose the problems, and then they seem to get misdirected in their quote to try to do good for nature and for their fellow humans.
That's the whole game, dude. That's literally the whole game, is to misdirect people's youthful anger at the corruption in the world and at the evil in the world that they see, and they don't know what the solution is, and so they tell them the solution is to go and fight the revolution, to go stop it. You have a what's the word, responsibility. You have to stop it. Who's going to stop it? It's like that Rage Against the Machine song, what better place than here, what better time than now, or whatever. It's like, do it now, go, fight, don't think, act. Like, that's the whole point, is to get these young, idealistic people to just go and do it, fight it, and then they show these documentaries like Pickaxe. Look, if they won, you can win too, but they don't show the people that get thrown in a jail for, a long time to win, and then again, what is it all for? So, yeah, no, that's the whole game, dude. And that's who we were surrounded by. That's who I was at the time, was, a person who wanted to do good. And again, this is why, nowadays I spend so much time talking about, my opinions now, because I've learned so much since then. And I'm trying to let people know, like, yes, the world is evil. Yes, a lot of this corruption does exist. Yeah, it's everywhere. And it's total hubris to think that you're going to stop it and that you're going to do anything about it, and that you should spend that energy to do something about it, which is to work on yourself and to do the internal work in your own heart to walk away from evil. And by doing that, and by being in Christ, we can then affect the people around us. And that, by God's grace, we will be redeemed and set apart from the world and saved out of this world, which is fallen and evil and corrupt, and that's the stuff that I didn't know back then, that had I known, could have saved me a lot of trouble and could have saved a lot of these people that I knew personally from very long jail sentences, and ruined lives. And so yeah, so I mean, we spend all this time in this camp, and then everybody leaves, and then we find ourselves the very next morning in a big circle of people, and it was so lame, dude. It's like, because it's anarchist, there's nobody at the head of it, except of course the organizers that are at the head of it. But other than that, like, we all stand around, and if everybody's okay, do this, what do they call it, sparkles or whatever, to show your support, because clapping, that triggers people, so you got to
The
do the.
spirit fingers.
Yeah, they called it sparkles at that time,
Mm.
but yeah, spirit fingers, whatever. It's like, don't clap, do this. And so, okay, guys, this is the plan. We're gonna do this and this and this. Okay, everybody's okay. Okay, anybody have any issues? No, okay. And then we're gonna do this and get together with your affinity groups and make a plan. All you can know about it at this moment is that it is an X site, and I'm not gonna say what kind of site it is, because again, I don't want to, whatever, give away too much information. But this is the kind of place that we're going. Work with your affinity groups and decide what you're going to do. What we can tell you is that there is a monopod that we are going to be setting up, and we're going to need about 150 people to all get together and agree to help put this thing up. That's going to be Orange Camp, because you're going to have to run into the facility to do it, but then you can run back out once the monopod's up, and so also, we've got hazmat suits that everybody's going to put on. We've got face masks that everybody's going to put on. So that way we're all in the exact same clothing, so that when the cops get there, but assume the cops are already going to be there when we get there, they won't be able to identify you out of the crowd. The protesters in Green Camp across the street are going to be in hazmats and masks. Everybody's going to be in hazmats and masks, And this is February. This is up north. Okay. It's a little bit north in February. It was cold and rainy and wet, and like, we're in these like painters. They weren't even hazmat suits. They were like painters gowns, like these white thin painter suits, so it was just so nasty. And So yeah, so we get up to the A point, which is right before we left. You get into a car with your affinity group, and they give you a sheet of paper, and it's basically MapQuest. This is long before Google Maps, right? So they gave everybody this printout sheet of directions to the first rendezvous point. So you drive there, and then you sit around and you wait for all the cars to show up. And I mean, this is like a massive amount of protesters, all in these painter suits and face masks. And then the organizers are there with another stack of papers for everybody, and that'll take you to B point, rendezvous point. And then we did that multiple times, crossed multiple borders. And at one point, actually, the state troopers stopped us, stopped one of the organizers' cars, and was like, "What's going on here?" Because we're all at this like rest stop off the side of the highway, and there was like hundreds of people in these like suits, just looking sus as hell, And the state troopers like, "What's going on here, guys? What are y'all doing?" And they go, "Oh, we're actually going to be doing a protest in that state over there." And they were like, "Oh, not in this state? All right, good to know. Have a good day." So they didn't care because we were actually going into another state to do it. So it was sort of like, whoa, that almost went real bad. So we make it to all these different rendezvous points, and then finally we get to the site. We get our final sheet of directions. We get to the site, and my group got there very early, and so we roll up, and we're like the only ones there, and we're waiting, and nobody showed up for like 45 minutes, and we had no idea what happened. And then when they showed up, we were asking her what happened, and they told us the state troopers stopped us because we had left early from D point. We got our directions early, so we just left. We didn't wait for everybody. And then when they came, they told us, yeah, the state trooper stopped us, and we almost got busted. But, luckily we were crossing the border and they didn't care. So we get to the site, and then we wait for everybody to arrive. The organizers give one final sort of, speech to everybody, pump up the hurrah spirit or whatever to go do this. And then everybody rushes the site all at once, and we all just ran in, and all of us that were helping set up the monopod, I was one of them. We all ran in with the stuff over our shoulders, and it was a small site, and there were probably, I want to say, about 6 workers at the time, and they were just like, what is going on? Like, all these hippies just descend on their job site and just start chaining stuff up, and set up this monopod. Somebody chains themselves to the monopod. They got a massive crowd of protesters out front. And of course the organizers called the news and called all the media outlets, come on down, we're doing crimes, come on down. And people were handing out donuts to the workers. Hey, no offense to you, man, but we don't like the people you work for, but not, you get a free day off, brother. That's all, just sit down and don't get in our way. And there was a group of people with an accordion playing music and like doing a little parade dance. People climbed on top of these towers and hung banners with the Earth First logo and slogans and stuff, and all sorts of stuff. At this point, it starts raining, and it's just muddy, and it's miserable, and it's freezing cold, and there's still no cop there. And it was pretty amazing that there were no cops there, because we had all planned on them being there waiting for us. And so it took them probably about 45 minutes before the first police officer showed up, and they sent one cop, one guy. Like, they had no idea what they were in for. Like, the workers called the cops and were like, hey, we got some idiots here. And the cops, I guess, didn't realize like the severity of the situation, because they sent this one skinny dude who shows up, and it was just like trying to stop everybody. Hey guys, stop it, get out of there. Because we're at that point, we're trespassing, we're on this private property, and so he's trying to get everybody to leave. But there's people chained up. All of us in Orange Camp are still on the facility, because we're like, yeah, move us, try it, try to get us to leave. And at one point, the cop tried to arrest somebody. He came in, he grabbed somebody and tried to arrest them. At which point, we all just swarmed in and surrounded him and just grabbed the person that he grabbed and ripped them away. And then the cop fell on his face in the mud and was covered head to toe in mud, and just went and sat in the squad car and just sat there. And we were like, we just unarrested somebody. Yeah, we did it. So we were all celebrating that. And then finally, like, 10, 15 cop cars show up, and they had undercover cops there, plainclothes police officers there, probably FBI agents there. And multiple of the affinity groups actually went into the building of the workers, so into the facility itself, not just on the grounds and on the towers, but they actually opened the doors, which were unlocked, and they went in and they started handing out donuts and sodas to the workers and stuff. And because they did that, it was technically breaking and entering, even though they didn't break anything, I guess. And so at that point, these plainclothes police officers started to go into the crowd of protesters and just started grabbing random people and arresting them for, felonies. Like, it was like, we don't care who we get. We're just gonna get who we can and just start loading them up into police, what do they call them, paddy wagons or whatever. And so at this point, it started getting really sort of tense because, now at this point, Orange Camp is outside of the grounds. We're now on the outside of the fence. The fence has been padlocked and chained shut. There was a truck out front that was chained down. There was a monopod that was set up. There were all these banners. There were people on top of the towers who were there in Red Camp. They were staying up there until they got arrested. But everybody who was in Orange Camp now, we all descended back to the other side of the fence. That way we were a little bit more safe. At that point, we're not trespassing. And since we're all in the same colored clothing, they didn't really know who did what. And so they couldn't really we felt a little safer that way. And they had this one cop who we were split up into 4 different massive crowds, right? And some of them were over here and some of them were over there and some of them were over there. So the cops would come up to one group and they'd say, hey, you need to get to the other side of the street. This is still technically their property. You need to get to the other side of the street. Okay. And then we'd start slowly walking. And then the cop would turn around and try to go to the other group. And as soon as he got halfway, we'd all turn back around and go right back up to the fence. And so it was like playing this stupid little game with them. And at this point, a couple of the protesters had gone to the houses, the residential houses that were across the street, and they started talking to people saying, hey, this is what we're here to do. We're trying to stand up for Mommy Earth or whatever. Can we stand on your front lawn since it's your property? Don't kick us out. Because first they move us across the street. Then they say, actually, this is, state property. You got to actually go down. So they were just trying to basically get us to leave, by using little loopholes in the law and like the letter of the law. Eventually, we get one of these houses to say, yeah, sure, you can stay on our property. So now everybody's on their property, basically. And the media showed up and all this stuff happened. And then that's when they started arresting people. That's when they started trying to throw people into the wagons. Like I said, these plainclothes police officers. And then word just spread throughout, like, yo, they're grabbing people. Like, we need to get out of here. And at one point, I remember there was a cop who was booking it towards me, like running straight for me, dude. And like, so I turn and I'm booking it across this park to try to get to the car where we're at. And there's like a crowd of probably 30 people running with me. And I'm running and I look back and I see the cop make eye contact with me and he's coming for me. And so I start running as hard as I can. And I don't know if you ever tried, like, if you've ever been in that situation where like you're like terrified and you're running, but I pushed it too hard and my leg muscles tensed up and they just locked and I just fell. And so literally my legs just couldn't move anymore. I fell face first and then I'm laying there and I'm like, okay, I'm like 10 states away from my home. I'm like 17 years old, 16 years old at the time. I'm going to jail for a long time. Like, it just hit me like, oh my God. And I get up and I start running and I look over and that same cop is now like way away and he's got his eyes on the dude who was furthest away, the dude who was the fastest runner. It's like he wanted to challenge himself for something. He saw the guy that was further and he's like, I'm getting that one. And so luckily I didn't, go to jail or whatever, but we made it back to our car and we were like, holy crap, dude, this is insane. We got to get out of here. So we sort of, the organizers had given us I don't know if it was a walkie-talkie. I forget exactly what it was, but it was, or no, they told us beforehand, we're going to have an after action meeting, and we're all going to get together and, post breakdown. How did it go? What happened? Did we do good? Did we do bad? Blah, 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 blah. And so, there was a little confusion afterwards of where it was going to go down. And finally we get the word that they had contacted a pizza place in like a few towns over. And they called them and said, hey, can you host 250 people? And they found a pizza place that was like, sure, we'll call in some extra waitresses. So we all ended up meeting up at this semi-small pizza place. and fairly large, but semi-small for the amount of people. And we all got together, and then the organizers came and they did a breakdown. They were like, okay, 35 people went to jail. We're going to try to get legal funds together for lawyers for them, blah, blah, blah. Here's the charges they're facing. We were able to shut down the facility for a day. There's still 12 people from Red Camp that are still there, so they started passing around cards like fucking Hallmark, get well soon cards and stuff where everybody's signing it like, thanks, brother. You really did a good job for the revolution or whatever, and then they started asking for donations for their legal fund and stuff. And like, yeah, we're going to need to get lawyers for these people. Like, so everybody chip in what you can and blah, 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 blah. And, it was at that point that, I started to realize how dumb it all was. I know I'm kind of an idiot for not realizing before that, but realizing like, yeah, 35 people went to jail for felonies, and I could have very easily been one of them, and really it was just pointless. It was like, okay, you cost this facility $1 million, and these, yeah, I don't know, man. It was very wild. And then throughout that whole experience, I just sort of was slowly becoming disillusioned with this whole concept of anarchism and stuff, because I'm like, okay, this isn't like what I read in books. This isn't like, some utopia, all of us, pitching together. There's like clearly organizers here. There's clearly people who are at the top of this. They clearly have money and they're getting it from somewhere. And we're clearly the pawns, and so it's like, what is going on here? The people that I was just talking to, that I was just having a campfire with, 2 nights ago, are now in jail in some strange state that they've never been in. Their families don't know where they are, and it's just like, man, this ain't good, dude. And I was still sort of at that point sort of drunk off the experience, and it didn't really fully set in until a few weeks later, or maybe even longer. But that definitely planted the seeds in my head that like this wasn't right, And then over the next months, years, when I started to learn more about politics, philosophy, I started having different life experiences. I started connecting the dots more and started to see like I said, about the funding and about all this other stuff, and the hypocrisy of it all, and the pointlessness of it all. And it really that I sort of marked that experience as a turning point for me, as far as when I started to stop being an anarchist and started to, question that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, with the funding, I just did I just Googled painter suits, just trying to find a price on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what they were like 10, 11, 12 years ago, but they were around like $6 to $7, right? And so I said, okay, I just did some quick math. I did $7 times 250, right? If you have 250 people with, each wearing a $7 painter suit, that's $1,750. Like, and that's not like, that's a relatively large amount of money for, for like what's going on there. Like, somebody has to, and I'm assuming this like 2-week camp, did they charge y'all anything to come to it?
Nope.
Okay. So they're having to get, like you said, they have to get the food for everybody. I don't know if they're paying the commune or charging the commune.
It was good food. It was all vegetable. It was good food. They had vegan and non-vegan options. They had meat. They had, and everybody at this camp would volunteer to do certain things. So like, you could volunteer to help do dishes. You could volunteer to help the kitchen. You could volunteer to sit at the welcoming camp. And so every single one of us were encouraged to take a shift at the welcoming camp, where you're given a pack of cigarettes, a walkie-talkie, and basically every time somebody would arrive at the facility, you'd go, okay, we got 4 people coming in, and it was your job to let everybody know if the cops were there, and to let the cops know that this was private property and that they were not allowed to enter. So it was volunteer basis stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, because okay.
It got me back on cigarettes too. I won't lie, because I was not smoking at the time. And then I took a shift at the welcome camp at 3 a.m. and they had a pack of Winston's there, and I'm just sitting there and I'm like, Ah, fuck.
Well, another thing I wanted to just mention with just a quick side note with the painter suit is that's like another tactic in the same kind of vein as black bloc. So a lot, I think I talked about this in another stream, but a lot of people will look at, these people out in black, smashing windows, throwing bricks and whatnot. And, like people will say like, oh, it's Antifa, and like, okay, it is, like, this is kind of a nuanced, and this is not to defend these people, I'm just saying this kind of a nuanced conversation. And so what they're doing when you see people out there with, black hoodies, black shoes, black pants, black masks, dark goggles, there's a reason the reason they dress like that. It's a tactic that comes out of, it came out of Europe. I think it was Germany. I think that's where it originated. It's when you go out to these demonstrations, these riots, these protests, whatever you're doing, if you know you're going to be doing things where there's a good chance of getting arrested, then you all look exactly the same. So, if you have tattoo, that's why you wear long sleeves. If you have hand tattoos, you wear gloves. If you have, neck tattoos, whatever, you wear like a face gaiter type of thing. Like, there's a reason for all of this. And it's like the painter suit, so everybody looks the same. So it's not like afterwards, particularly, it's a counter surveillance measure, particularly. So if they get photos and the cops are going through them, well, okay, this person's wearing a mask, they've got dark goggles, you don't even know what color their eyes are, so you can't tell who any of these people are.
It's a criminal mentality and it's a criminal mindset, and that's the whole culture of it, is fostering. It's like doing crimes, like it's a security culture. It's the whole mindset of like you're smashing the system. The same company that produced the Pickaxe DVD that I had, all Crime Think, they would produce DVDs of, why I love shoplifting from stores, why I love shoplifting from Walmart, why I love squatting houses, why I love breaking the law. And it's like it's considered a revolutionary act.
Yeah, that's like the whole, it was illegalism, is that what they call it? Like where you intentionally do as many things illegal as possible as a way to, like, destroy the system. It's like destroy the system. And it's like, okay, yeah, all that's gonna, but all that's gonna do is eventually you're gonna get arrested. And if you have no money, then you can't bail out, and you can't get like if you have a felony, that makes getting a job harder. And so it's like it just compounds people's own personal problems. And it's like, okay, you can even say, okay, yeah, you get a card and sign it for everybody. And okay, yeah, that's a nice gesture, but that's not going to do a guy or a girl who's facing 35 years in prison. That's going to do them a whole lot of good to know that, hey, we're all, out here eating pizza, but yeah, thanks for ruining your life. And, I've known some anarchists. I've seen a lot of anarchists. Some of them are tough people, I'll give them that, but a lot of them are really not cut out for federal prison, especially if they get strung up for something like with a long sentence or a something considered a violent crime.
Yeah, again, I mean, you're crossing state borders to commit, really like acts of domestic terrorism that have to do with the nation's infrastructure, national gas sites and pipelines and logging and all that stuff. So it's real bad, and a lot of these people, are just the smallest, weakest, skinny soy boy type, vegan types. And then also everybody had fake names, right? That was a part of security culture. You never give out your real name. So like the people in my affinity group, like one dude was Socrates, one dude was like Zeno, and all these stupid names. And so I couldn't even follow up afterwards with their court cases. I didn't even know what happened to them. I would love to go back and see, did the organizers actually get them lawyers? Did they actually come and visit them in prison? Did they actually give a crap at all? Or did they just say, okay, action's done, on to the next one? Let's go to the other side of the country and do the same thing and get, 35 more people arrested.
Right.
And also, is it a way to get people who are, who have the not only have the optimism and the idealism, but who have the will to go out and do these things? Is it to get them locked up, to get them off the streets, so that just in case they don't actually get any real ideas of what the problem is, just in case they want to actually organize, in their churches or something, get them off the street, get them in jail. So that way, the only people who are left are the docile ones that don't want to do anything or won't do anything. There could be an aspect of that too.
That's a good point. I hadn't really considered that, but yeah, if you get the active people, the people who are actually willing to, put some skin in the game, as they say, then yeah, you really kind of neuter the movement in a sense. So where you've got people who would be like, oh well, we'll just go out there and hold signs and march, and like, I'm not knocking that. If people want to protest, they can. I don't. That's not my thing, but I don't begrudge anybody for exercising their constitutional right to protest. Like, that's fine. But that kind of leads into, with the ELF, the Earth Liberation Front, is one of the documentaries. It's linked in the description. It's free on YouTube. It's called "If a Tree Falls," directed by a guy named Marshall Curry. Even if you're not into like eco-activism or any of this kind of stuff, it's just from a purely like, I don't know if aesthetic would be the right word, but just like a documentary filmmaking standpoint, it's very well done. It's a great documentary, so I recommend people watch that one. And it chronicles how, I mean, it sort of gets into the history of the ELF. It started in, I think, England. Was it Brighton, England, I think? And then it was active in the U.S. as well. And in that documentary, that gives kind of the historical context. So Tim Lewis, the guy whom I think if I remember correctly, he actually directed Pickaxe, and he's interviewed in there fairly extensively, and he talks about how a lot as the ELF was functioning in the U.S. at the time, it came out of a lot of those kind of actions where people, there was like the U.S. was going to go logging in some area, I think in the Pacific Northwest. So they took out, like, they dug a tunnel, basically, not a tunnel, but they like took a section out of the road so the trucks couldn't get past, and they kind of set up this camp up there. And then there was the same type of things we were talking about. People would go up in these trees, and the stuff, it was just brutal. Like, it was horrible what the cops were doing to people. They're like cutting people's clothes off and, macing them in the nether regions, and, like putting Q-tips in mace and putting it under people's eyelids, just like horrible, just sadistic kind of stuff. And so that was one of those things that radicalized a lot of people, because then they're like, okay, well, wait a minute, all this letter writing, all this going up in trees, this is doing nothing for us. And like, this isn't getting us anywhere. And so that was when you had a small, relatively small numbers of people who decided, okay, well, we'll take this to the next level and actually, do something, right? So they were going out, and they burned down a ski lodge in Vail, Colorado, because I think they were going to expand it, and it was going to encroach on some species habitat or something. They burned down a logging company's like headquarters or whatever. And so yeah, there was a lot of these kind of actions, and they actually, because these cells operate as really small cells where, it might be one person, might be a few people. And so what they would do is they would do an action, and then they had an ELF press office where they would send a communique and say, hey, this is what we did, this is why we did it. And then that person would, disseminate, whoever ran the press office would disseminate.
They have a long history. They have a long history of doing these things. And so they've got the system down as the best way to compartmentalize. And as I said, affinity groups, that's not just for, Earth First, that's for ELF, that's for ALF, that's for any direct action is what they call it, not protest, but you're actually breaking the law to attack something, to do something. The affinity group is the model, the security culture is the model. It's cells, it's small little splinter cells or whatever they call it, cells of groups that will come together, do a thing, split up, and then maybe they'll rejoin, or maybe you've got multiple affinity groups that you do different actions with. And then they have the sort of decentralized setup where they have, I forget the word for it, not communique, but what's the word for it? Like one of the guys in my affinity groups was the police,
like
guy
liaison.
Liaison. That's what it was. Yeah. So we had a police liaison where none of us, they schooled all of us. Don't say one word to the cops. We have one guy or two guys who are the liaison. They speak to the cops, and they know they are trained on what to say and what to do. So the cop says, "Hey, who's in charge here?" And then the police liaison walks up and says, "Actually, we're an anarchist organization. We collectively make decisions and blah, 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 blah. But I am the liaison. And so anything you want to say to them, you say to me, and I will, transmit your messages." "Okay, well, tell all of them to get, to get across the other side of the street." "Okay, sir, one moment. Everybody gather around. So here's what Officer Barbrady said to do. So they want us to move to the other side of the street. Um, who agrees with that? Who doesn't agree with that? Hey, anybody have anything to say?" "Yeah, I have something to say. F the police." "Okay, thank you. Great. What do you have to say?" "Oh, I say we go deeper into the facility." "Okay, noted. What do you have to say?" You know what I mean? And it's this waste their time mentality where it's like it's all structured in such a way as to make it as difficult as possible for the system to, or the enforcement or whatever to deal with it, to stretch it out, to lose as much money as possible, and to keep as many people protected and out of jail as possible. And so I'm sorry, that's kind of a rant, but the whole point is that the cells, the small groups, that's a well organized, well thought out thing that you will see in any activist group. They all sort of utilize the same tactics.
Yeah, no, and see, I appreciate that's one of the many reasons why I wanted to have you on here, because like you have that, you can give the greater context to this kind of thing, and yeah, that's very important to mention. And yeah, I mean, because it's not, and that's another thing. Like I was getting at with the organizers, a lot of people like these crazy kids, and the thing, there's a lot of older people in anarchist groups, and I mean older relative to like what you might think. There's people in their 40s, 50s, 60s. You'll even see like a lot of these, a lot of activists. There are people who I've heard of who are like in their 70s and even 80s who have been around since Vietnam, at least, protesting, and people who are like lifelong committed activists.
They're
And so, yeah, these things.
professionals. They're
Yes,
literally professionals. They get paid to do it. That was
right.
one thing that blew my mind. Yeah.
Well, yeah, which is just an insane kind of idea. And that's something that when I first heard about professional activists several years ago, that it's like, how was that even a thing? Like it was crazy to me. And so
I have a buddy that literally got paid $600 to protest. I literally
wow.
know a guy who got paid to go to a protest. So that's one of the things I brought up with Tristan when we talked about this 2 years ago or whatever, is the whole there, back then it was a story about paid protesters going on, especially with the George Floyd stuff and all that stuff. And everybody was arguing whether or not it was true. And I'm like, no, I know for a fact it's true. I've seen the money. Like this kid didn't have a job. Like I seen it. Like it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing is that there's a lot of, I think, misconceptions and just things a lot of people don't understand is they think, well, like that was a thing where people were saying, well, who has time to go protest in the middle of the day on a weekday? Like, do these people not have jobs? It's like, no, a lot of them don't, or they have the kind of jobs like in like service industry jobs, like food, like restaurants. And there's a lot of people with those kind of views who I've met, I used to work in restaurants, and I met these kind of, I worked with these kind of people who had these ideals, and it's very easy to get off work at any time. You just tell your boss like, hey, I'm going to be gone, these days next week. Okay, well, if you're already scheduled, get somebody to cover your shift. Okay, cool. And, that's just how that functions. And now most of the people who work in restaurants are not like that. I want to be clear. It's not, but I'm just saying that that is something you do see. And that's why, one of the reasons why you'll have people out there at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday is because they either don't have a job, or it's a job that it's not like one of those where you have to be there from 8 to 5 every day or whatever.
Well, it's just like any war, right? It's the poor people that are the cannon fodder. It's the disenfranchised. It's the ones with the smallest amount of stuff to lose and the most to gain. They don't like their life. They're unhappy with it. They're just a dishwasher or something. And so they get wrapped up in online chat groups, or they get radicalized by groups of idealists, and they want to do something to be a hero. They want to make a difference. And so, yeah, you see a lot of that. A really great film to kind of give you an idea of what it's like is Fight Club. You know, you see the Project Mayhem, the way that's, you know, it's the waiters and the janitors and the, you know, 9-to-5ers or whatever, you know, when they get off work, they go to their compound and they get radicalized and they think they're fighting some great war. And like, that's really how it was, you know?
Yeah. And that's another thing I was thinking about is sort of the methods of getting people into these groups. And I'm not accusing, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that like Food Not Bombs is responsible for, you know, terrorist kind of actions. I don't mean that, but I'm just saying that it's like, okay, well, here we give out food. And then here's a pamphlet, you know, here's a brochure. And it's the same thing like with in the If a Tree Falls documentary. One of the guys, another thing is that a lot of these people who are involved in this, well, I'll get to that in a second, but I just wanted to make the point about there was a venue in New York City called Wetlands, and I don't know if I think it closed. I don't know if it's still open or not. But one of the guys in there talked about how you would go, and I'm not accusing the people who ran Wetlands of any wrongdoing. I think people understand that, but I just want to, you know, disclaimer: I'm not accusing them. I'm just saying that the way you can see how people get into these groups, which people make their own choices, right? It's not an indictment of any of the groups or anything, or any of the, you know, methods by how they get there. I'm just making the point that he was talking about, you know, Wetlands, they would have like punk bands, metal bands, hardcore bands, whatever, who would come. And Wetlands was a famous venue, and people would come to these shows. And then afterwards, they would have screenings on things like deforestation, on factory farming. And, you know, if you've ever seen any of those kind of, especially the factory farming videos, like they're upsetting and they're really gross. And it's very, and like I'm against factory farming and deforestation, but it's just interesting to see the kind of methods that people have that are utilized to get people involved in this kind of activism.
Yeah, the documentaries are definitely good to check out. Everybody, you should definitely go watch Pickaxe, watch these documentaries that he's mentioning, because it gives you an idea of what we're talking about, and you can see an inside look and a lot of this stuff. Somebody said, are there NGOs that pay protesters? I thought that was a great point. Yes, that's the whole point, is where's this money coming from? You know, a lot of it's coming from these, you know, big groups, you know, whether it's like the George Soros NGOs or there's all sorts of shadowy networks of, you know, organizations and corporations and whatever. I mean, I'm not an expert on that stuff, but there are other people who are experts on it that have done videos on it, and it's very interesting, you know. What was I gonna say? Yeah, I mean, yes, you know, the funding is a big part of it, and for sure there are NGOs that's where a lot of the money comes from.
Yeah, and there was something I dug, and you know, look, I'm I'm no fan of the you know, U.S. federal government, and I'm not saying that they're a reliable source on everything, but I found this. Let me. Okay.
Oh, one other thing too. I remember.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The nonprofit. Somebody said, "Oh, BLM is a nonprofit organization that makes a lot of profits." Well, that's the thing, is that to be a nonprofit, these are structures, legal structures that rich people utilize all the time to make a bunch of money and to shield a bunch of money from taxes. And that's something that I learned when I was traveling, meeting a bunch of rich people and stuff, and learning more about 501c3s or whatever they're called, the nonprofits, where literally it's like, yeah, we have a nonprofit organization, and I'm a millionaire, and I get all my millionaire buddies to come and donate hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then that's all tax write-offs. And then, you know, we're all on the board of directors or whatever, and then we get a salary from it, so we get paid, right? That's not profit, that's just upkeep. And everybody, you know, who donates saves a bunch of money, so they actually get more money than they would have otherwise, because they don't have to pay as much taxes. So it's like, you know, it's all a bunch of legal BS, and they know how to game the system, and all of it ties in. All of the NGOs, these nonprofits, it all ties in. Look at Hillary Clinton's Clinton Foundation. She's not running that because she wants to help the world. You know what I mean? There's a multifaceted reason why they do it. Part of it is taxes. Part of it is public perception and optics. You know, oh, I'm a philanthropist. You know, so it's
Yeah, I mean, there's so much like just scammery that goes on with that, and it's. I was talking to somebody like years ago, and they're like, "Well, how do people get rich off of like a nonprofit, like if they can't make a profit, it's like they just have the high, they just report high operating costs. Like it's not that difficult. It's pretty simple. If you say like, okay, well, hey, this guy, these people who run the organization, they're worth it. So these people need to make $200,000 a year. That's their salary. Then there you go.
These
Like
boards,
you can get rich off this easily.
They'll meet 4 times a year, right? They'll make millions of dollars in donations. They'll meet 4 times a year. They'll have a 2-hour meeting where they all sit together and they go, okay, we have $45 million in our budget for this year. We are a nonprofit dedicated to helping homeless people. So what are we going to do? Well, let's go to the Knights of Columbus and let's donate a pallet of food. And then let's go to the homeless shelter and we'll donate, we'll give them $1 million. We'll give $1 million to the homeless shelter. And then we'll make a press release. We'll get the press to come out and we'll talk about how we're really serious and committed to fighting the homeless crisis. And so we gave $1 million to this, blah, 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 blah. And then maybe they'll pay some journalists to write some articles about it and about the seriousness of homelessness. And then, maybe we'll go get oranges and we'll deliver it to a poor community over here. And then we'll write a news release or an email list to all of our donees and say, here's what we did in 2023. We did all of this stuff. And of course, the $30 million that they had to pay for their, yearly salaries for being on the board of directors for, basically 6 hours a year of actual work. That of course went to us and to all of our employees and the people that, making this stuff happen. And so it looks like they're doing all this great stuff, but really they're just lining their pockets and it's just basic corruption,
Yeah, and that's the thing is, a lot of these people, they do quote unquote good things, like where, okay, yeah, they will, maybe go and like you said, like go, okay, we're going to go give a bunch of food to homeless people or something. But that's just a cost of doing business, right? It's I mean, because they have to basically, right? And but yeah, one thing, let me see if I can get this screen. This is the first time I'm doing this screen share. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. Now this was a report I found on, is that coming up on the screen? Okay. I just lost I can't see the screen anymore. Okay.
Oh, you can't see it? I can see it. I got to let my cat out. So give me 1 second.
Okay. I just couldn't see, like it took the camera view away.
Right.
But yeah, this is just kind of an interesting, and this is linked down. If anybody like is interested in this and wants to read this, this is down in the video description. I think it's the first link. This is from the Department of Homeland Security. So this was a report they done focusing on illegal actions, arsons and boomings between 95 and 2010 by people affiliated with the ELF and the ALF. And so yeah, out of there were, let's see, 55% of these attributed to ELF, 45 to ALF. Of these 239 incidents, 62, or you can read all that. But what was interesting is, I'll get back up to that pie chart in a second, but what was interesting is that they analyzed the data on the perpetrators. They found that the majority of the offenders, 74% were male, 100% were white, 88% were not married, and they had at least 69% had at least some college education, and over half of the perpetrators had some connection to both ELF and ALF. And so, yeah, many of the perpetrators convicted of multiple crimes, prosecuted federally, almost all pled guilty. But what's interesting about this pie chart, this is just something that caught my eye, is what we've seen lately with, and one thing I want to make the point about is one thing the ELF and the ALF, one thing that they always stressed in any of their actions, even illegal activities, is they had a commitment to not harming humans. And so they weren't, going out and like shooting people or anything like that. To my knowledge, I don't think in any of these kind of actions, be it like arsons, bombings, whatever, they weren't, it was always done to like empty buildings, for example. And to my knowledge, I don't think anyone was ever killed as a result of any of that. Somebody could fact check me on that, but just something that was interesting, 15.1% of these were meat and food processing plants. And
We just saw recently all the food production fires that happened, right?
yes, and that's been something that's been going on for a while. And I'm not saying that they're responsible for all of those, but that is something I hadn't really thought of, and I'd heard about some of those stories in the past, but now more recently, with this taking place, with a lot of that, it was very interesting to me to see how there's been a rash of these over the last few years, and people have offered a lot of different explanations, but I haven't seen anybody point out that these kind of groups could be, and there's,
it just makes sense, dude. Honestly,
yeah.
again, like in the history of these sort of events, like anarchist groups have been utilized for the same purpose, even just as shields, just like, even if it is a series of, federal agents under the guise of an ELF cell, who's
Hmm.
to know the difference? There's no structured, centralized ELF group that can say, oh, that wasn't us. Anybody who goes and burns down a logging facility can call themselves ELF, and they technically are. So it's like it could very well be a bunch of, agents who call themselves ELF to do it, or they could use criminal, idiots who are leveraged with blackmail or with money or with whatever, to do their bidding for them. And they absolutely would do that. And it only makes sense to do that. And they have like I said, the organization and the structured idea of secrecy and the way to do these things already known. It's already known. So it's just a tool in their tool belt that they can use to pull this kind of stuff off.
No, absolutely. Yes, that's a very, very good point. And so yeah, I'm trying to find this now. There was one last part of this. I was going to it's the down here in research methodology and this kind of is a segue to the next thing I wanted to bring up. Let me see where. So they talked about how they kind of compiled all this. And so they said they decided that environmental and animal rights extremists are individuals or groups that subscribe to the aspects of the following ideals: support for biodiversity and biocentric equality, which is the view that humans are no greater than any other form of life and have no legitimate claim to dominate the earth; the belief that the earth and or animals are in imminent danger; the government and or parts of society, such as corporations, are responsible for this danger, and this danger will ultimately result in the destruction of the modern environment and or whole species, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And again, if people want to read that whole thing, you can check it out in the description. But that was interesting. Let me stop sharing here. Okay. Now that was interesting to me with the whole, like on this corner of the internet, if you will, we talk a lot about depopulation. And this is something I just, whenever I find like an interesting book on all kinds of different subjects, I tend to pick them up. And one of the ideologies that's not super well known, but seems to inform a lot of these groups is something called deep ecology. And it was formed, I think, in the 60s or 70s by a guy. I'm going to butcher his name. It's like Arnie Nass or something like that. He was, I think, European. If y'all have listened to this show at all, you know I'm terrible with names. But one of the, so yeah, I'll come to this. This is like one of it's called Deep Ecology, written by George Sessions and Bill Devall. And this is one of kind of the key texts of Deep Ecology. And so there was a quote in here from a guy named Warwick Fox, who is an Australian philosopher. And he said, and I'm quoting here, "It is the idea that we can make no firm ontological divide in the field of existence." He's talking about deep ecology, kind of summing it up. That there is no bifurcation in reality between the human and the non-human realms. To the extent that we perceive boundaries, we fall short of deep ecological consciousness. So what he's saying there is that there's no difference between, and see, I put a note in here in the margin that this is kind of like a dehumanization, is what he's saying, is that there is no difference between me and a rock and a blade of grass and a stream, a snowball, like everything. Yeah, maybe the snowball's not a great example.
That kind of ties into the lady
at.
who was a bush earlier in the story.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I'm a bush. Yeah.
And so one of they list in here the basic principles of deep ecology, and let me see. They say that, okay, so number 4 in the basic principle is the flourishing of human life and cultures is compatible with a substantial decrease of the human population. The flourishing of non-human life requires such a decrease. So the idea is that humans are destructive and they destroy everything and they kill the environment. And so in order for all other things to flourish, humans have to decrease.
Die.
And
You have
so
to die. A lot of you have to die. We need to keep, it's like the Georgia Guidestones, keep the population under, what is it? I don't know.
It's like 500 million or something.
Yeah. And yeah, of course, yeah, to save mommy Earth, most of us need to die, and it'll actually make us better. So in order for a better life, you need more death. Okay, obvious Luciferian evil. And it's the complete opposite to what Christ says and what the Bible says about being fruitful and multiplying. And you've got the opposite there.
And this and I absolutely agree with what you're saying. Yeah, it absolutely, because it's there's one other quote I wanted to read, because to show you like where this ends, because some people might see that and they're like, okay, well, yeah, there are a lot of people on Earth, and there's what they claim there's like 8 billion people now, and then but back when the US the world population was like 5 billion, they're like, oh, it can't sustain any more than this. Like, we're still here, and I don't deny that humans have caused and sometimes do cause destruction of nature, and I certainly don't agree with like going and clear cutting forests and poisoning streams, like, obviously, but someone might see that and they're like, okay, but I want to show you there's another book. It's called Can Life Prevail, by a guy, I'm probably going to butcher his name as well, Pentti Linkola, and he had a quote. Okay, yeah, this actually. Okay, he's the one who talked about the 5 billion, actually, because just 2 quick quotes here. He said, the idea that the Earth could permanently bear the current burden, right, of 5 billion people without a dramatic change, such as the abandonment of the whole Western culture and way of life, is purely absurd. The faith a child or animal might have in the future, just as it is certain that fallouts always originate from somewhere other than one's own country, similarly, any government and the sophisticated people they lead would claim that there is no overpopulation problem in their own country. Well, there are still 2 partial exceptions, China and India. The leaders and enlightened minorities of these countries admit that even their own populations are too large. China and India, however, are only exceptions, countries that, thanks to their ancient cultural traditions, are ahead of the majority of savages that inhabit the earth. Right, so this is what this philosophy, and then there's just one other quote I wanted to read here is I'll skip that one, but it's basically, he has this long quote where he describes as that man is like clashing with like with nature, which is a natural world, because of man's actions. All of these plants and animals and fungi are going extinct, and so these species are disappearing. But there's one quote where, and this is just to point out where this kind of philosophy leads to. And so he's makes this case that the minimum age requirement for, if people were to make decisions, like you had to be 80 years old or older to make decisions, then we could avert a lot of destruction if it was only old people who are making decisions. And now, you sure, there's a lot of wise old people, there's a lot of dumb old people. Like it's I think that's kind of a simplistic way of looking at it. But this is just a paragraph here that where he's talking about this in the context of medicine, and he says, now, however, the medical profession is adopting no common strategy. As such, it can easily be divided into the good and bad. On the one hand, doctors can prolong the life of a wise old man with surgery and cardiovascular interventions. On the other, doctors are engaging in irrational and extremely destructive behavior to save 5-month-old premature infants, regardless of the cost. That is, the cost in natural resources. As a side note, the cost of medical care can be seen to touch the conscience of all doctors alike. Certainly, the pills, intrauterine devices, and condoms developed by medicine deserve our praise. But a huge burden of sin falls on the shoulders of a share of pediatricians and gynecologists, and by extension, the whole medical profession. The deep drop that has been achieved in infant mortality alone should be deeply distressing to a biologist. Besides, every step forward in the pharmaceutical industry or national health system should at the very least have been accompanied by an effective program of education with regard to contraception and family planning. Only as the leaders of a firm policy of population control could doctors have been acclaimed as the benefactor of mankind. So, I mean, that's where you see he's saying that, oh, hey, you know, a premature baby, let him die, kill him, you know, give everybody birth control. And so since you just did a stream on this, what kind of, I mean, how do you see this as tying in as like the, you know, the birth control, population control as tying in or, you know, seeing overlap with the kind of radical eco-activism? Because it's always, if we don't do something about the climate or, you know, the earth, then everybody's going to die. So we have to kill everybody to keep that from happening.
Right. Kill everybody to stop everybody from dying. Yeah, it's all the Antichrist spirit, dude. It's all there to sort of try to foster this mentality of guilt and shame for existing. The idea of looking at human beings like they are a cancer on the earth, like the Georgia Guidestones say. You guys are not good, bad, people bad, mommy earth good. It's all the same thing, you know, it's all pushing the same mentality. It's all geared towards the same end, which is the opposite of Christ, the opposite of life, which is death. That's just the way I see it, coming from an Orthodox Christian, you know, place, from a worldview. Is, you know, I have to compare and contrast it with, you know, my own faith, which is in Christ. And when you see it from that lens, all of these different sort of just different versions of ideologies or activisms or worldviews or religions, it all sort of gets very simplified, and you start to see things in terms of Christ and not Christ, or in place of Christ vis-a-vis Antichrist, you know. And so, yeah, that's a very interesting book. I think that's very telling. One book it made me think of, which is on a slightly different subject, but it is relevant to this topic, was a book that inspired me called How Nonviolence Protects the State, which was very popular when I was in these groups, which was all about basically telling people, hey, all you hippies, all you activists who think that being a pacifist is part of activism, it's not. Nonviolence is a statist position. It is a position that they want you to have because the government uses violence, the government uses force. And so if you don't use violence and force against them, you give them the monopoly on violence. And so in order for us to attack the system effectively, we have to be willing to commit violence, whether that be acts of violence against corporations or people or, you know, figureheads, all sorts of stuff. And so that's definitely a book to check out if anybody's interested in understanding the mentality of activists. That's a big one. That's a big one that's circulated in these circles. And before we get on, I just want to give a shout out to the 18. We're circulating from the 18 and 23 viewers. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. Please like and share the stream. This has been really fun so far, and we covered a lot of really important things, you know, throughout this whole show. So if you're coming in midway through, definitely be sure to go back and watch it from the beginning after we're done, because you know, Maddie, you've made a bunch of great points in this. I think we both have, and you know, and I'll just take this moment again to shill for both of our channels and say, please subscribe to both of our channels and support the shows. You can support, Maddie's got his Cash App link. Did you put that in the description, Maddie? Is it in the description? I know you use it sometimes.
It is.
Okay, sweet. So go send in them super chats to Maddie, dude. Support his show is baller. And also, if you want to support my show as well, I'm not really posting my links, but you can find them in my channel if you do wish to support. That's how you do it. And I'll probably be taking a break from streaming for the next few days, so I could really use the help. And yeah, that's it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you throwing that in there. I always forget to you know, tell people to. I get so wrapped up in the conversations, I don't even think about and yeah, the Cash App. You know, people kept asking me, so I was like, all right, I'll put it in there. Somebody had asked me in one of the last streams. I don't recall who it was off the top of my head about doing a PayPal. I'm going to have to do a whole bunch of work in with PayPal to get that. I do plan to get that set up. I just, it won't be like right away. It might take me a minute to get all that.
People love to shit on YouTubers for accepting donations. I've gotten people who are like, "Oh, bro, better than spanging," or like, "Oh, you're just like spanging online." It's like, no, I'm putting on a show. I'm more like busking online. It's like when I was busking, I was putting on a show and accepting tips if people wanted to support. And it's like that's really what this is. It's like we're putting on a show. We're trying to educate, entertain, and this stuff takes a lot of work. You just started doing the YouTube and it's not easy. I spend hours and hours researching this stuff, and I certainly don't do it for the support. I started doing it long before anybody supported, and even if nobody supported, I'd still probably do it. But people don't realize how much it helps and how much it encourages streamers to keep going. That's why we say, if you like the show, support it, because not only does it make us want to do it more, but it basically will actually extend the show as well. Because I don't know if this ever happened to you, but like if I'm doing a stream, I cover the topic, okay, it's done, nobody supported. Well, it's been 2 hours, I'll hop off. But if people are sending a bunch of super chats, you're all excited and you're happy, and it raises the energy of the show, and you want to keep going. And so it's a way to extend the show, and it's also a way to see more of them happen, because then there's more of an impetus to want to do it. And yeah, and since I'm basically doing this full time right now, I really I count on it a lot for just getting by until my job starts back up. So it helps. And for all the haters, like, you try it, you go put a show on and don't accept tips, and tip my hat to you if you can. But I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with saying, hey, if you like it, support it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was just one of those things. Like I hadn't planned on like I said earlier, I'm super hyped to get 100 subscribers. I basically just started this channel because I do a lot of reading and researching. And so I wanted to talk about things I was interested, have my friends on to talk about things that they're in, the kind of things that we were interested in and read about and research. And so, to get 100 people is great. And, I've not, you mentioned like, getting super chats and it kind of gets you fired. I've actually not gotten one yet. I don't say that to
you bastards,
guilt trip anybody.
You should guilt trip them. No,
if y'all feel so inclined, and, I always tell people, hey, if you like what you're hearing, like the stream. And, Tom, okay. I think it was Thomas. Yes, Thomas, I will work on getting the PayPal worked out. It'll just take me a little bit of time.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. You just have to like link an account.
Oh, okay. We'll talk later. But yeah, the thing with I lost my train of thought. But
I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault. I can't remember what I was saying, but anyway. Oh yeah. So it's people, if you enjoy what you're hearing, like the stream, if you want to share it on social media, certainly share it. If you know people who may be interested in this kind of thing that we're talking about, then share it. And leaving comments helps.
One thing I can say to justify why we're doing this too a little bit is because it is good to know this sort of manipulation of idealistic minds, because even especially if you're like an Orthodox Christian, like a big part of what we do in the church is to have people come in who are in all sorts of problems, and they're seeking the truth, and they're seeking Christ, and they're working through different issues. And idealism is rampant in young people, and it's very easy for young people, like I did, get sucked up into these activist groups, into these social issues, all this stuff. And it's good to know how the enemy operates, how they sort of manipulate people, and what the answers to these things are, and what the right way to go about dealing with the evils of the world are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of the goals here is to talk about these things. And this is something, Jay Dyer talks a lot about, is thinking critically. And that's something I'm big on is, think critically, don't take things at face value, and yet help people recognize manipulations and also see, because I've always been, I've always been kind of, just growing up, like running around in the woods and things like that. And I've always been very conscious of, the environment and, I even, back before I knew about like a lot of the green scams and things like that. I mean, I recognize that a lot of that is, it's like corporations putting this kind of stuff on. A lot of it just doesn't make sense if you think critically about it. But yeah, like I said earlier, I have a problem with, going through and clear cutting, and something that they talk about in the If a Tree Falls documentary. And I'm going to keep pushing that because it's a great documentary. It's free on YouTube. People should. It's not that long. I think it's under 2 hours. I highly recommend checking it out. But one of the things that they interviewed one of the guys who runs, I don't know if he ran, I can't remember if he ran, it's been like 2 or 3 months since I've watched the documentary a few times. It's been a little bit since I've watched it, a couple months. But one of the things he talks about is that with logging is they have to, it's apparently government law, like that they, if they plant a tree, they have to go plant like 3 or 5 more, whatever it is. And so he's saying like, no, like my business is trees. I love trees. Like I don't, but then and I think he was being genuine. Like he seemed like a very earnest kind of guy, but I couldn't help but thinking, well, the reason is you go and replant trees, aside from it being the law, is so that you can have more trees to go in to cut. Like you're not putting these up to go and, you're not trying to like have old growth, and when you see a tree,
that's the big point.
Yeah. And now I haven't been out in the Pacific Northwest and seen like the, 500-year-old trees, but I've seen trees that are very, very old. And when you look at something that's been there a long time, it's, insane. It's almost hard to imagine, like it's that tall, it's still standing. It's really incredible to see that, an old tree still thriving like that. But anyway, where I'm going with all this is that, and that's something that particularly in the West, I think there's this idea of like humans, have, dominion over the earth, and we can do what we want, and anything where people are trying anything, that's like pro environment, all that's just liberal commie government control. And it's like, well, no, because I don't think, like, overfishing the oceans is a problem. Blowing the tops off mountains for coal is a problem. Again, that there's, clear cutting forests, like these things. And you kind of alluded to this earlier, is that, and not to sound like a centrist, but I mean that, for lack of a better term, like there's some middle ground there in that, we can use the land for our purposes. Look, I have a problem with land developers. It really bums me out when I see, an area of woods that gets turned into a strip mall, so we can have another like Target and Shoe Carnival and Five Guys or whatever. That's pretty disappointing to see. But it's also interesting to, just one last point. I want you to get into that. Just one last point on this is that the Earth is also incredibly resilient, and this is something that I don't. Because if you look, like I can drive around, not too far from where I live, I can go drive past an abandoned house that's got, the roof is gone. There's a tree growing out of the roof. It's, taken over with vines. And so the earth will kind of take back the things if it left to its own devices, so to speak. It will take back what's been put there and overtake it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's definitely resilient, and the problems are real, like we said in the beginning. It's like there's a lot of truth to some of the issues that get raised by activists and stuff. There's a lot of falsehoods in there too, and there's a lot of manipulation there. But there are certainly serious issues. There's a lot wrong with the logging and stuff, like you said, mentioning old growth. It's not just that the trees, the numbers of trees or whatever, it's not just we need to replace the ones that we cut. It's also that they're tied in with the entire ecosystem, and it's more than just the trees. It's the animals that live in the trees, and it's the fungal networks underneath, and it's all this different stuff, and soil quality, and blah 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 blah, and then industrial runoff, and there's all these sorts of issues that are negatively impacting the environment. But the problem with the worldview is that they lack the fundamental understanding that this world is sick on a deeper level than just humans are bad and they're hurting the earth. We have dominion over the earth. We are stewards of the earth. We should treat it with respect, just like we should treat our bodies with respect, just like we should treat everything that God's created with a certain dignity and respect, utilize it when we need it, protect it, keep it good, keep it safe. At the end of the day, though, you know what I mean? Like, it's going to die. Everything on here is going to die. And the point is not to try to make it live forever, which these people, these Silicon Valley types, these Illuminate Confirm types, these crazy people and these evil people fail to understand, is that it's not about trying to live forever. It's not about making your whole life dedicated towards, like, we gotta fix the world. We gotta fix the world, because all that is it's a distraction from the real work that we're here to do, which is repentance. It's to actually stop sinning and to follow Christ and to follow him towards crucifixion, which is death to the old self, and sanctification through that through the cross, which is our gift. And it's, again, it's just a totally different worldview. It's a totally different mindset. And most of these people who don't have Christ, or all of them who don't have Christ, they don't get that. And so when they see the evil in the world, they then feel, especially when they're younger, a responsibility to do something personally about it. And it never goes anywhere, because it's total pride to think that you're going to fix the world. So that's all I'd say about that. Is it's like, yes, these are real problems, and I'm not saying there's no solutions that we can or should take, right? It's a sort of very nuanced topic, and it falls down to have the what's that cliche quote about accepting the things you can't change and changing the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. There's certainly some of that, but it all has to start with first things first. Are you in a church? Are you in the community? Are you actually engaged in the salvific work? And then maybe church brotherhoods get together and they do things like going and praying at abortion clinics, or certain social things, trying to homeschool their kids, trying to stop these sort of social issues that are hurting their communities. And so it's a fine line, and it's a nuanced thing. And so I would never, some people are accusing me in my own comment section of saying, oh, just roll over, just let the government just like, do whatever, because it doesn't matter. It does matter. It's just, you have to, first things have to come first, like, and it has to be within a proper worldview. And if it's not, then you're just, pissing up a tree, basically. Like,
No, that's a really good point. Yeah, and I think I see this with other people, who make content where they'll talk about this, and not this specifically, but they'll talk about things. And this is, again, why I'm so big on critical thinking, that people will say something and then people will just take this knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, so you're saying this. And so it's like you said, where people have this knee-jerk reaction where it's like, oh, so you're saying that yeah, we should just roll over and get steamrolled by the government or the NWO or whatever. And it's the same thing, like if you have a critique of capitalism, if you have some critique of capital, oh, what, so you're a communist, you're saying that we should all just pay 90% of our income to the government. It's like,
yes, we're a communist.
Yes, that's
Yep.
exact. I'm saying that you should pay 99% of your income to the government. And it's like, yeah, people like that, it's not even worth talking to. But one thing that was interesting, and this just, I just thought about this. It's maybe tangentially related, but since you mentioned like the people praying at abortion clinics, it doesn't have to do with that specifically, but there, out of the straight edge movement, which, if people don't know, I'm sure a lot of people know about that, but the straight edge movement is, came out of the hardcore punk scene of where people were rejecting, drinking alcohol, taking drugs, using tobacco, having promiscuous sex, these kind of things. And then there were really like two different iterations of what they call hardline, which was a more militant version of straight edge. And kind of the second iteration of it was interesting, that it was sort of, I don't know if it came out of, but it was influenced by like the deep ecology kind of movement, or philosophy, but they, straight edge, minor threat, Dr. Crispy, he gets it. And to where the kind of second generation of hardline, they actually took it to the point where they kind of got accused of being conservative, because they said, okay, well, really they were just being logically consistent, because they were saying, okay, well, if all life is, precious, then, and we should, they became like anti abortion. They became anti homosexuality. They became anti, not to get like gross or anything, but like anti, certain acts that you could engage in that don't result in pregnancy or yeah, I'm sure people can figure out where I'm going with that, but it was just very interesting to see that. And I was like, well, they're actually being more logically consistent, kind of removing the hedonism from it. Anyway, that was just
Yeah, we see that with a lot. We see a lot of times we always say, people's hearts are angled towards God, and it's designed that way, right? And we're always seeking the good and we're seeking the true, and we just get misdirected and misguided. And, that's why the church is so important. And so, yeah, in all sorts of different um, worldviews, traditions, cultures, all these things, people do find bits of truth and bits of good. And it says in the Bible that, I'm going to butcher the quote or whatever, but that basically, you know, God is in many places, right? And people, he's everywhere, and people find bits of it here and there. And that's why we call the church the fullness of truth. Orthodoxy is the fullness of truth. It's not, just, the pagans over here found, hey, it's probably good not to murder our brother. It's probably good not to steal your brother's stuff. It's probably good not to rape or kill people, but so when the church, finds those cultures, they baptize what is good, they baptize what can be, and they get rid of the evil. And that's the whole thing. And so, yeah, in straight edge culture, like, it's good to be sober. It's good not to be a hedonist. And it makes sense because that's just the nature of human beings. We want to find what is good and true,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's something that some people who they seem to think that if anything's like not in the church, then it has like no truth to it at all, or it's nothing can be right outside of the truth. And it's like, okay, well, a lot of like with the hardline people, like these are and straight edge as well. Like, it did not come out of Christian kind of circles, and the hardline where the anti-abortion, non-reproductive adult activities, and that like those things are, now they may be doing it for the wrong reasons, but yeah, like you said, like they are getting at the truth in a sense. But like you said, yeah, in the church is found like you said, the fullness of the truth, where everything, like the truth is found there. So you can have elements of it outside of there, of things that like, okay, maybe that's like maybe doing the right things for the wrong reason or a different reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the fullness of truth is found in the church, and that's because it's been given to us through revelation. God has revealed the truth to us. He's revealed himself to us, and it's at the church where we can go commune and actually unite with the truth, which is Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that was pretty much everything I had. If you had anything else you wanted to say on any of the things we've talked about, I mean, feel free to jump in. But I'd kind of exhausted
Sure.
all the material I had for the most part.
Yeah, I'd say in summary and closing, groups like Earth First, Earth Liberation Front, Animal Liberation Front, some of the new groups that have come out. Shouts out to Tristan Haggard, the artist formerly known as Primal Edge Health, a strong, beautiful trans woman in the mountains of Venezuela or Papua New Guinea or whatever, milking gerbils to feed his internet farm or whatever. Shouts out to him. He's done a lot of good information, good videos, good streams, good edited stuff, all on activists, eco-activists, vegan activists, all that stuff. So if you'd like to learn more about that, definitely go check out Primal Edge Health, Tristan Haggard, YouTube, Rockfin, et cetera, et cetera. And you can definitely find a lot of great information about all of this stuff and documentaries about these things from the activists themselves and from critics and critiques on these things. They're all educational. We did this, I think, for the most part, to try to just speak a little bit on this topic, educate on the mindset, the mentality of activists, why people do this, what they do. And also to share my personal stories from my involvement in these things and what I learned from it. And we do that hopefully to help other people who maybe are trapped in this stuff, or to help protect our friends, our family members, our parishioners, you know, in our churches against the snares of the enemy, which use a lot of this misguided optimism and idealism um, to destroy your life, which is what the devil always tries to do, is to just kill you. And so he'll use this. If you're an optimistic, idealistic person, he'll use environmental activism or animal activism, or, you know, if you're a sensitive person, he might use drug addiction, or if you're a lustful person, he might use, you know, fornication. He'll use whatever he can to destroy your soul. And so you know, covering this, hopefully we were able to help some people. And if you found any value in this work, please do send your supports in via donations or super chats to both of us. You know, Maddie's got his links in the description. I got my links over at my channel, and it would be greatly appreciated. And if you have any questions, you can, you know, contact either of us on Instagram. I'm sure both of us would be happy to answer it. Lent is beginning, and so I just ask everybody, please forgive me, a sinner. And going into Gray Lent, all of us can grow spiritually, and we can get to Pascha with clean hearts and with joyful spirits. And yeah, just pray for each other and pray for all of us and forgive each other. And that's pretty much all I have to say.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, very, very well said. And just one last thing, and I can't, if I'm repeating myself, I think I started to say this and I got off on sidetracked. So if I actually did get into this and I repeated myself, but I just want to drive the point home that, yeah, like you said, a lot of this, you know, people get misdirected, and these things can kind of be used to steer people wrong of people who genuinely, and we didn't even get in really, I mean, we kind of mentioned them in passing, the ALF, but I mean, that's another problem, you know, animal testing. I have a problem with that, you know, factory farming. I have a problem with these things. Which is not to say, like, I'm not anti, you know, meat. Like, I eat meat, you know, I'm not anti-hunting or anything like that, but there's a difference between using the animals that are here, and, you know, like, you shouldn't go out and just like harm animals for the fun of it. And I don't mean, you know, like population control, like shooting animals. I'm talking about animals, you know, sometimes like you have to keep things in balance. That's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, what I'm getting at is that I just wanted to drive the point home about with these things, of where these philosophies can lead you, of saying like, okay, well, yeah, I want to do, you know, save the earth or whatever, which is like a noble goal, but, you know, like you said, impossible. Like it's not going to happen. And so, you can see, like, with this Linkola guy, where that can lead you to where you're saying like, oh yeah, you know what? If a baby's premature, let it die. Like, this is the medical system is a failure because it's trying to, you know, save children. That's been a failure, that is trying to save babies. And so yeah, to see where that can lead you. And then, you know, with the If a Tree Falls documentary, seeing people who went to prison, and including one of them who got a terrorism enhancement on his charges. And so he is now forever labeled as such. And that now he's, you know, apparently he got a job like right out of prison. I don't know, I guess he's doing okay. I don't really know. But for most people, that's, you know, you could go away for the rest of your life. All kinds of terrible things can happen while you're in prison. You may never get out. You know, even if you do have, you're like 10 years, well, you may get killed 10 years, you know, before you get, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong. And it's easy. And they even touch on this in the If a Tree Falls documentary, that there was kind of a realization, like, after, you know, they committed these arsons, they were like, oh crap, like, what did we just do? And it's easy. And, you know, I'm just saying, it's easy for people to get caught up in these things, kind of go with the flow. You know, there's energy, you know, you want to make things happen. And so, yeah, people can get swept away in, you know, all kinds of problems. And now most people who get into eco-activism are not going to wind up at, you know, Florence Supermax with Ted Kaczynski and, you know, Timothy McVeigh, like, but it could happen. And you could find yourself
and it does
kind
happen.
of thing. Yes, absolutely, it does happen. And you can find yourself, going to that point where thinking like, oh yeah, saving babies, that's a failure of the medical system and we shouldn't do that. Like that's where it can take you, which is just a totally insane way of thinking.
Yeah. Not to mention, like we said in the beginning, like a lot of these groups, the organizers are that like traditional soy boy manipulator type who look for, young women or young men that are impressionable, and they just totally prey on them. And Tristan's done great videos talking about a lot of them. So
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, huge thanks to everybody in the chat, everybody for tuning in. If you've enjoyed the stream, click the like button. Yeah, like Jerry said, if you have any questions about any of this, you can certainly hit us up. Our Instagrams or in the or in the description, so you can get in touch with us there. Huge thank you to everybody in the chat, and like I think it was Ellie who said earlier, it was like 100 sub party. So this was a good one to 100 subscribers. Thank you to everybody in the chat. Much appreciated for the ongoing support. Thanks again to Jerry for coming on, and we will see y'all soon. Got some more streams.
Let's give a shout out to Baselit Analyzer.
Yes.
He's doing a stream 7:00 tonight p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So in like a half hour, go over to Baselit Analyzer's channel. He's doing hang on, actually let me pull it up before we end so I can actually give a proper shout out. The Beach, Alex Garland, Gen X Vietnam, half hour. Go watch it.
Yes, and I don't have his channel handy. I don't know if somebody can put it in the chat. But yes, yeah, just if you look up Based with a Z, Based Lit Analyzer on YouTube, yeah, go support him. He's come on the show a few times. I was on his Caddyshack stream. We had a lot of fun. Jerry was on that one too. We had a lot of fun. And hopefully we'll get him back on soon. And so yeah, we'll see y'all here in pretty soon. Have a good night.
God bless.